Imagine a man who neither argues nor clings, who feels no need to have the final word. When everything falls apart, he does not fight to stay. He disappears, quietly, proudly, without a trace. Not out of weakness. On the contrary, because he knows that silence can echo louder than any justification. In the modern world, we are taught to perform, to persuade, to reclaim what was lost. But a true man, one who lives by principle, understands that fighting is not always the noblest choice. Sometimes strength lies in walking away, wordlessly. It is not escape, but the act of someone who knows the worth of his own soul. They do not chase, do not compete, do not demand to be understood. They walk away, not to punish, but to preserve their dignity. And in that retreat, in that silence, they make the strongest declaration of inner power and freedom. 1. Feel it, then let it go. In the journey of a man who lives by Stoic philosophy, facing pain is not unfamiliar. It is an essential part of growth. No one is so strong that they've never been hurt. Nor is anyone so composed that they've never felt disappointment, loss, or despair. But the greatest difference between the weak and the rational lies in how they confront and transcend these negative emotions. A true man does not pretend to feel nothing. He doesn't suppress his pain to prove he's tough. On the contrary, he allows himself to feel fully. He listens to the voice within, looks directly at the wound instead of ignoring it. Because only when we have the courage to face what's hurting us can we truly begin to heal. In the Stoic spirit, pain is not the enemy. It is a harsh, yet necessary teacher. The things that hurt us today may well be the very soil from which strength will grow tomorrow. When a man is betrayed, abandoned, or forced to leave a once meaningful relationship, he doesn't run by burying himself in work, entertainment, or fleeting pleasures. He doesn't try to replace emotion with distraction. Instead, he takes the time to understand where the pain comes from, what has been lost, and what lesson lies beneath. Emotion, in Stoic view, is a natural response, but it should never dictate our actions. We may hurt, but we must not lose reason. When a man screams, blames, or reacts impulsively out of pain, he allows emotion to rule his life. In contrast, the awakened man learns how to feel without becoming the feeling. He knows, I am experiencing anger, but I am not anger itself. That distinction between emotion and essence is the foundation that allows one to feel yet remain sovereign. After fully feeling, the next step is letting go. And this is where most people get stuck. Letting go is not forgetting, nor is it denial. It is the conscious decision to release our attachment to what no longer serves our growth. It could be a person, a memory, an expectation, or an unfulfilled promise. Letting go does not mean it was never important. It simply means it no longer aligns with who we are becoming. A strong man lets go not because he no longer feels, but because he understands. Holding on to what has died in the heart only prolongs suffering. Some relationships, though once beautiful, must all end. Some people, though once close, must be left behind. Not because they are bad, but because the path has split in two directions. Stoicism does not teach us to forget quickly, but to understand that nothing is permanent, not even emotion. Everything in life is temporary. Pain is no exception. It arrives, teaches what it must, then departs, if we let it. But if we resist, cling, or refuse the lesson, pain will stay, disguised in many forms: lingering anger, a sense of betrayal, or a quiet, festering resentment. The wise man knows pain does not require retaliation or desperate grasping. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" he asks, "What am I meant to learn from this?" That question is the key not only to getting through, but growing beyond. When we choose to feel and then release, it is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is the mark of one who knows his worth and refuses to be pulled away from his inner center. We do not chase those who've hurt us, nor do we beg them to understand our pain. We take the lesson, hold the silence, and move forward. There is nothing left to say, because true strength requires no explanation. In the end, what makes a man admirable is not how few times he's been wounded, but how he emerges from those wounds, calmer, wiser, and more grounded than ever. He carries no bitterness. He leaves only space, not as reproach, but as proof of the strength of someone who has felt and then let go. And in time, that space becomes the deepest imprint on those who once failed to see his worth. 2. Silence, the highest declaration. In an age ruled by noise, from emotional conversations to the clamor of social media, silence has become a rare luxury. But to one who lives by Stoic philosophy, silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of wisdom, control, and profound inner strength. Used rightly, silence becomes the most powerful form of communication. People tend to react instantly when hurt, misunderstood, or insulted. They retaliate, explain, or fight to reclaim their voice. But the true man, the one who walks the path of reason and self-mastery, has no need for many words. He knows that each hasty response is a trap laid by emotion, whether by accident or design. Silence is not submission. On the contrary, it is the mark of a mind trained not to be swept away by emotional storms. The Stoic sees silence as a deliberate act, a conscious choice to protect inner peace. In tense or chaotic moments, silence is not just a response, it is a strategy. When a man chooses silence over reaction, he sends a message clearer than words. I do not let others shape my responses. It is a declaration of control. He does not waste words trying to sway those unwilling to understand. He does not argue to prove he is right, nor does he raise his voice to demand respect. For true respect is not begged for, but earned through the way we live and act. Stoic philosophy teaches that we cannot control the world, but we can fully master our response to it. And silence is the purest expression of that mastery. When we say nothing, while the world expects us to lose control, we reclaim our power. We refuse to join meaningless battles, refuse to let fleeting emotion overpower the calm we've built over years. Silence also carries immense influence. A strong word may be forgotten in the noise, but a well-timed silence lingers. When someone awaits a reaction and receives only stillness, they begin to reflect. That void, that absence of response, creates a kind of vacuum that draws them into deeper introspection. They start to ask, why didn't he respond? And in that doubt, they are forced to confront their own actions. The man who chooses silence also understands the power of observation. Instead of rushing to reply, he steps back, sees the whole picture, analyzes the situation, and acts from clarity, not emotion. Silence grants him a wider lens, free from the distortion of external chaos. He does not react impulsively because he knows that doing so leads to disorientation. Instead, he remains composed, and silence is the ground on which he stands firm. In relationships, silence is sometimes a test. It forces others to face the void of absence. No blame, no rage, no final words. Only silence, and it echoes far longer in the mind than any accusation ever could. It gives others the time to think, to feel, and to recognize what they once failed to see. Many fear silence, believing it signals the end. But the Stoic does not remain silent to punish or to close the door. He is silent because he understands that not every conversation requires resolution. Some things are best ended with quiet composure. This is not evasion. It is liberation. Ultimately, silence is also a form of self-respect. When we no longer need to react to every word or negative gesture, we prove that our worth does not depend on how others perceive us, but on how we choose to respond. And in a world of constant noise, choosing silence is not the easy path, but it is the way to dignity, wisdom, and true peace. 3. Freedom lies in no longer needing to be understood. One of the heaviest burdens the modern individual carries is the need to be understood. From casual conversations to deep relationships, most of us live with a longing for others to understand us, to empathize with us, and ultimately to affirm our worth. However, in the Stoic spirit, true freedom only begins when one lets go of that need. The Stoic understands that trying to explain oneself to those unwilling to listen is a futile battle. Understanding can never be forced. It is always a voluntary choice on the part of the listener. When someone is not open or sincere in their reception, no matter how many words you offer, it all echoes into emptiness. In such moments, continuing to explain is not only ineffective, it erodes inner peace. Freedom, in the Stoic view, begins when we stop defining our worth through the eyes of others. A man anchored in principle does not enter every debate to prove himself right. He feels no need to over-explain his actions or decisions. He knows that those who truly see his value require no explanation, and those who refuse to understand, no amount of explanation will suffice. As long as someone lives under the obsession of, "I must make others understand me," they surrender control of their emotions to outsiders. Their happiness depends on approval. They trade their inner stability for momentary agreement. But one who has absorbed the Stoic lesson lets go of that burden. They understand that living with integrity matters more than being understood. In relationships, the absence of constant explanation is a sign of maturity. The more a person grows, the less they feel the need for external approval. He does not have to declare that he is trying, enduring, or hurting. He chooses calm composure as a reflection of self-respect. That silence is not a wall. It is a healthy boundary between the self and external judgment. Stoicism teaches that a person of inner strength knows what belongs to them and what does not. The thoughts, emotions, and opinions of others lie outside our domain of control. There is no reason, then, for a man to pour his energy into managing others' perceptions. Instead, he uses that energy to fortify his character and live in alignment with his values. Refusing to explain is not rudeness or arrogance. On the contrary, it reflects clarity. When someone understands themselves, They no longer need the world's agreement. They do not live to please the crowd. They live to remain true to themselves. And in that consistency they build trust, wordlessly, without needing to prove anything. There are moments in life when being misunderstood is inevitable. But the rational man does not react emotionally to misjudgment. He does not rush to defend himself, nor does he chase after fractured trust. He lets his actions speak, allows time to reveal his character, and lets silence soften shallow judgment. True freedom does not come from being understood by all. It comes from knowing who you are, living by that truth, and accepting that no one is obligated to agree. When a mind reaches this state, the opinions of others lose their grip. He is not cold, but he is no longer bound by the need to be understood. And in that lies his freedom, not just in action, but in every moment he lives. 4. Indifference is not apathy, it is awareness. In modern society, indifference is often mistaken for coldness, insensitivity, or lack of joy. Yet in the light of Stoic philosophy, indifference does not imply cruelty or detachment. On the contrary, it is an inner state built on understanding, self-mastery, and detachment from unnecessary emotional entanglement. Indifference, in its highest form, is the fruit of awareness. When one no longer allows themselves to be swayed by the turbulence of the external world, a man who lives by reason knows that emotions are fleeting, while the consequences of unrestrained actions can endure. Therefore, he does not let the moods of others dictate his behavior. When ignored, distanced, or disrespected, he does not respond with anger or sorrow. He maintains composure, not out of revenge, but because he knows his energy is not meant for what lies beyond his control. Indifference in Stoicism does not mean a lack of feeling. The practitioner still perceives, still notices, still understands, but chooses not to let those emotions dictate their entire perception. They remove themselves from impulsive reaction to preserve their peace. When someone shifts in attitude, withdraws, or inflicts harm, the Stoic does not dig for reasons, nor dissect every word or gesture. They observe, acknowledge, and let go. This indifference is a direct expression of a core Stoic principle, the dichotomy of control, the division between what is and isn't within our power. Other people's attitudes, feelings, and changes are beyond that line. Reacting emotionally to those elements is not only futile, it undermines inner balance. A strong man does not perform indifference to hurt or manipulate. He does not pretend to be distant to confuse others. He is genuinely indifferent because he is internally whole. He no longer needs unconditional affection, nor seeks empathy, nor looks for salvation from outside. He understands that placing expectations on others is a misdirected burden. In relationships, indifference can often be mistaken for the end of affection. But to the awakened, it is a way of establishing internal boundaries. When the other shows detachment or disrespect, the Stoic does not beg, argue, or react explosively. They simply reflect that same energy with a quiet but resolute withdrawal. No blame, no demand, no need for change. This indifference does not stem from pain, but from clarity. After enough emotion, enough setbacks, one realizes this: not everyone is meant to walk with you to the end. And that need not be painful. It simply needs to be accepted, with silence and a steady step forward. Indifference is also a tool for guarding mental energy. In a world full of distraction, where people are easily swept into meaningless conflict or toxic ties, this attitude helps preserve one's center. By not reacting, not rushing to please, not needing to prove, we reclaim our time, focus, and strength to invest in what truly matters. More importantly, indifference signals a spirit that is not dependent. The awakened man does not need others' approval to validate his worth. He knows who he is, what principles he lives by, and what is non-negotiable. His silence and calm are not a void. They are a system of values made visible. This indifference, once it reaches its purest state, becomes a silent ritual. No need to speak, no need to explain, no need to fight. The man walks away, leaving behind all worn-out emotions and relationships no longer built on mutual respect. And in that deliberate retreat, he reclaims his place, not in someone else's heart, but within the inner world he guards with unshakable self-discipline. 5. Disappearing, not for revenge, but for rebirth. When a man walks away in silence, most of those left behind interpret the act through a negative lens. They see it as coldness, as silent punishment, as a form of inflicting pain without a word. But for one walking the path of reason and awareness, disappearance is never about hurting others. It is a necessary choice to protect dignity, preserve inner strength, and rebuild oneself from the wreckage. A man who follows Stoic philosophy does not act out of impulsive emotion. He does not leave to provoke regret or to orchestrate a silent form of revenge. He does not vanish to manipulate or force recognition of his worth. He withdraws because he has reached a threshold where staying would only erode self-respect and mental stability. This disappearance arises from a deep understanding. Not everyone deserves your presence. Not every relationship must be salvaged. Not every conversation needs closure. And not everything that hurts is worth holding on to. When all effort becomes one-sided, when one's value is no longer acknowledged, the resolute man does not exhaust himself to reclaim what no longer wishes to remain. Stoicism does not promote avoidance. On the contrary, it demands great courage to accept that some things cannot be changed and that the right thing to do is to walk away. To walk away not because of failure, but because of clarity. Not out of weakness, but because one is strong enough to let go. And that silent departure is the first step in a journey of rebirth. When a man disappears, there is no staged performance, no drawn-out farewell messages, no final conversations to explain, just a clean and decisive retreat. Because what he seeks now is not an explanation from others, but the quiet he needs to begin again. In this new space, free from the noise of expectation, pain, or unanswered questions, he can return to his core. The process of rebirth is not an easy path. It requires facing oneself. No illusions, no facades. The man must revisit every wound, every limitation, every loss he has endured, not to dwell in them, but to understand what must change, where to rebuild, and what must be removed from his life to avoid repeating old cycles. Disappearance, in the Stoic sense, is not vanishing from the world, but from circumstances that no longer reflect one's values and ideals. It is a strategic withdrawal from environments, relationships, or emotions that might derail inner growth. It is a conscious act to avoid falling into the same traps, to begin again from a better place, and to reconstruct one's belief systems, habits, and personal boundaries. Rebirth never happens in the crowd. It unfolds in silence, in deliberate solitude, in the quiet moments where a man faces himself without a mask. Only when he no longer has to meet anyone's expectations does he truly find the space to grow. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, only to become better, deeper, more grounded. And one day, when the rebirth is complete, he does not return to remind others of his absence. He needs no recognition. He does not seek to show anyone that he has become a better version of himself. His new presence, in posture, in conduct, in calm and focus, is the clearest unspoken declaration. Disappearance, in the end, is no longer an action, but a symbol of someone who knows what he needs, knows when to release, and knows where it is worthy to begin again. In that silence, he is no longer who he was, not a shadow of the past, but a new self, forged through pain, reason, and the unshakable desire to live in full alignment with his truest values. 6. No contact, because self-respect is inviolable. When a man chooses to walk away in silence, he has made a definitive decision. It is not a temporary break, awaiting an apology, nor a quiet maneuver to manipulate someone's emotions. It is the affirmation of a principle. No person, no circumstance is worth sacrificing one's self-respect just to maintain a connection that no longer reflects one's true value. Not reaching out after stepping away is one of the clearest expressions of emotional discipline. The man understands that every message sent, every call made in a moment of weakness is a trade of his resolve for a fleeting emotional relief. And once that door is reopened, every boundary once established through reason stands at risk of collapse. Stoicism teaches that honor and dignity do not come from how others perceive us, but from how we choose to respond in moments that test the soul. Not reaching out does not mean erasing emotion, nor denying what once existed. It is a silent declaration. I respect myself more than I need closure with someone who no longer deserves it. When a relationship ends in silence, it's easy to fall into the trap of regret or the urge for a proper conclusion. But the awakened man knows. Not everything needs to be explained. Not every door must close with words. Silence, when born from clarity, is enough to mark an ending both serious and dignified. Reaching out again is often driven by the hope that something will change, that the other will listen, feel remorse, or at least offer explanation. But Stoicism does not anchor life in the expectations of others. The man governed by reason places his worth in no one's hands. He understands that any action rooted in the need for validation carries the risk of undermining his integrity. Maintaining silence after departure demands intense mental discipline. Not everyone can bear the emptiness, the silence, the internal questioning. But the resolute man knows that in the resisting those impulses, his dignity is not only preserved, it is strengthened. Each day that passes without contact is a day he reaffirms his boundary, not with words, but through action. Keeping no contact is not merely a safeguard against recurring pain. It is a way of conserving inner energy. Every unnecessary reconnection depletes vital mental reserves. And when that energy is drained by the undeserving, one's journey of self-development cannot be sustained. In many cases, Prolonged silence becomes a quiet but unmistakable reminder to those who took the relationship lightly. They are forced to face the absence, not just of a person, but of a presence once marked by strength and steadiness. The man does not return, does not leave messages, does not send signs. And it is that complete absence that truly compels the other to reflect. The Stoic does not need confrontation to prove he is right. He needs no affirmation to feel whole. He does not try to fix broken bonds with pity or softness. Instead, he guards his dignity as a sacred fortress where no one enters without equal respect. No contact, then, is no longer a tactic. It becomes a philosophy, a deeply rooted value system, affirmed through deliberate behavior. In a world where emotions are easily swayed by loneliness, emptiness, and memory, the choice to remain silent is the strongest testament to maturity. In the end, not reaching out does not mean there is no longer care, but it is care redirected inward, a rightful and necessary priority to keep the soul intact, to ensure that what holds real value is never exchanged for a moment of weakness. And in that silence, the man preserves not only his self-respect, but the entire path ahead. 7. Let them live with their choice. When someone chooses to leave you, they are not only walking away physically, but making a statement, whether spoken or silent, that your presence is no longer a priority. In such moments, the natural human response is often to seek explanation, to hold on, even to fix what's broken. But for a man who lives by Stoic philosophy, the right course is not to chase, but to step back, remain silent, and let them live with their choice. A key principle in Stoicism is to accept reality as it is. No resistance, no denial, no embellishment or justification. When someone chooses to walk out of your life through action, silence, or disregard, that fact stands. Trying to ease their discomfort about the decision or to persuade them to reconsider is an unnecessary and counterproductive interference. The rational person understands that every decision comes with consequences. When someone leaves, they are not just choosing a new path, they are also rejecting everything you once offered. And so, they must be given the space to experience the reality of that decision, whether it brings relief, freedom, or emptiness. Intervening in that experience in any form only disrupts the natural process of consequence and learning. In Stoic practice, the act of softening the impact of someone else's decision is not viewed as kindness, but as a subtle form of resistance to the order of nature. What has happened must be allowed to undoed. If someone departs without explanation, let silence be the stage on which they face themselves. If they choose carelessness, let the absence of your presence show them what was lost, not through words, but through the irreplaceable void. The awakened man does not cushion others from the discomfort of choices that hurt. He sends no final message, opens no door just to clear the air, and finds no excuse to remain in the life of one who erased him. Because he understands that maturity sometimes only arrives when one must face the emptiness created by their own decision. A firm withdrawal, in this case, is not punishment. It is a healthy boundary. It is an unspoken affirmation. I respect your decision, and I will not reshape myself to provoke regret or bring you back. When people are left to live with the consequences of their choice, they learn the most valuable lessons about presence, about peace, and about the value they once took for granted. Many walk away easily because they believe the door is always open. They assume that forgiveness, tenderness, or longing will keep the one left behind ready to welcome them back at any time. But the Stoic does not revisit emotional cycles. He does not leave the door ajar for those who chose to exit. He locks it, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. Letting others live with their choice is also how you protect yourself from the cycle of expectation. If you return to ease their guilt, you carry a responsibility that was never yours. If you reach out just to ensure they don't feel too bad, you lower your own standards. True self-mastery only exists when you are calm enough not to rescue others from the consequences they willingly embraced. In silence, the Stoic man watches without reacting. He does not hope for remorse, wait for apologies, or expect a better ending. He lets reality do its work, to help each person see what truly matters, not through explanations, but through absence. And sometimes, only in your absence will they finally see what they so carelessly let go. In the end, choosing not to reach out, not to interfere, not to salvage, not to soothe, is not indifference. It is the height of self-respect. When you let someone live with their choice, you honor not just them, but yourself. And that very respect over time becomes an unbreachable boundary, one that only those who truly understand your worth will be allowed to cross. 8. When they return, you are no longer there. In many relationships, especially those once filled with deep emotion, someone's departure is not always the final end. In reality, some do come back, not because love remains intact, but because the emptiness they left behind begins to echo within them. But for a man who lives with reason and self-mastery, the moment they return is also the moment he has moved so far forward that he no longer belongs to the place they left behind. A central principle of Stoicism is that everything in life is subject to change. Emotions shift, people evolve, and the personal journey never stands still. So when someone returns hoping to reconnect what was broken, they often fail to realize that the person they seek is no longer the version they once knew. A man who walked away with awareness does not return as the one who was left. If he returns at all, it is only as living proof of the growth he has undergone. No longer being there is, first and foremost, a state of the inner life. That man no longer expends energy yearning, waiting for an apology, or hoping for a different ending to what has already ended. He has gone through the process of self-recognition, moved beyond the wound, and rebuilt his life on a more stable foundation. He does not deny the past, but he is no longer bound by it. What once caused pain has become nothing more than a memory, processed, folded, and put away. When the other person returns, what they often expect is a familiar response: forgiveness, softness, or at least a door still ajar. But the Stoic man does not let emotion dictate action. He does not act according to others' expectations. He does not return to finish a chapter that has already closely ceased, nor does he resume cycles that once eroded his dignity. He understands that returning is not always a noble act. Sometimes, not looking back is the most profound sign of awakening. One of the most admirable traits of the self-possessed man is that he feels no need to prove to others that he has changed. He does not try to showcase his growth, nor parade his strength. His silence, his steady presence, and a life no longer dependent on external emotions are the clearest answers. When the past returns hoping to meet the man it once knew, it finds only distance, not in words, but in the fact that true growth waits for no one. That man carries no hatred. He holds no resentment. But he does not reopen the past for the sake of a belated apology, because he understands that if someone truly valued him, they wouldn't have left. If they truly saw his worth, they wouldn't have needed to lose him to recognize it. Their return may be fueled by regret, but regret does not change the fact that he has already moved beyond the moment they were needed. Not being there is not just about emotion. It's about no longer occupying the same place. The heart has settled elsewhere, in peace, in clarity, in wholeness, that no longer relies on another. The mind has been restructured, no longer clinging to memory. Self-worth is no longer measured by anyone's presence or absence. In a world that constantly changes, to remain still is to risk decay. And when someone leaves, life moves forward, not in waiting, but in the conscious choice to grow. The resolute man does not freeze his emotions to preserve hope. He lets time do its work, cleanse the pain, distill what remains, and open the door to a better version of himself. And so, when someone comes back, be it through remorse or longing, what they find is not the familiar welcome. They face a new man with clear boundaries, with a soul no longer dependent, not because he has closed his heart, but because the old door no longer exists. A new door has opened, not for those who stepped out of the past, but for the future. 9. Absence is the final lesson. When words no longer hold meaning, when patience is no longer received, when every effort to mend becomes futile, absence becomes the final message and the deepest lesson a man can leave behind. In Stoic philosophy, absence is not a form of retaliation, but the pinnacle of self-mastery. When one chooses no longer to be present, to interfere, to repeat, to try, or to seek understanding, some truths in life cannot be conveyed through speech. No matter how much is explained or expressed, there are those who cannot or will not understand. At that point, continued presence only prolongs a cycle where the giver grows weary and the receiver grows careless. The awakened man recognizes that only complete withdrawal can create enough emptiness for the other to realize what was lost. Absence does not speak, yet its echo can be deeper than any argument. In Stoicism, lessons do not always come through instruction. Often, they arrive through what is missing, through what was once familiar, suddenly gone. When someone walks out of your life and you still feel peace, that is a sign of maturity. But when you walk out of someone's life and the void you leave begins to unsettle them, that is when they must face their own lesson. Absence here is not simply not calling, not texting, or vanishing from social media. It is a complete retreat, not appearing in energy and thought, in car, or expectation. When a man who once gave his time, his emotion, his presence, and his loyalty withdraws, it is not a mere void. It is the disappearance of a foundation, a sense of safety, and invisible support. Many fail to value what they have because they believe it will always be there. They behave as if presence is guaranteed, as if the other will forever be patient, waiting and listening. But when patience runs dry, the awakened man does not seek to hurt. He simply chooses silence, and that silence, steady and calm, becomes an undeniable reminder of what they let go. Absence forces others to confront themselves. There is no one left to argue with, no one to blame, no one to expect salvation from. In that space, they are left with the echoes of their own conscience, face to face with the questions once drowned out by noise and familiar presence. Only when there is no hand left to reach for do people truly reflect on their actions, and sometimes for the first time, they finally understand. Absence is a form of reflection, a silent mirror revealing neglect, carelessness, and what was taken for granted. No judgment is needed. No criticism is required. Merely not being there is enough to trigger a chain of realizations that words often cannot. When a man withdraws, the emptiness he leaves may reveal that some people are simply irreplaceable. In a world moving too fast, where true connection is easily lost, the sudden disappearance of someone, without noise, without explanation, can mark a turning point in another's growth. They begin to see that not every presence is accidental. Some people enter their lives as gifts, and only when that gift disappears do they recognize the value they once held. Ultimately, the awakened man does not return to instruct, nor does he wait for regret. He walks away to protect himself, and in doing so, he leaves the final lesson, not in words, but through absence. An absence deep enough to awaken awareness, quiet enough to stir reflection, and firm enough to ensure his presence is never forgotten. 10. To disappear like a symbol, without assertion, without looking back. In a world where people constantly seek validation, where the ego craves visibility, recognition, and praise, the quiet act of walking away without explanation becomes one of the most powerful expressions of inner strength. For the awakened man, disappearance is not a call for attention, nor is it a tool for revenge. It is a final declaration, silent yet resounding, modest yet weighty. Stoicism does not teach us to win through confrontation. It teaches us to withdraw willingly when the environment no longer aligns with our principles. A steadfast man needs no argument, no final word, no backward glance to see who might feel regret. His departure is not surrender, but transcendence, an act revealing that his worth needs no confirmation beyond his own conviction. To disappear like a symbol is when withdrawal does not signal weakness, but reflects sovereignty. That man does not seek to assert anything before he leaves. He writes no final message, posts no emotional reflections, organizes no dramatic goodbye. He simply walks away, knowing that everything worth saying has already been said. Through how he lived, how he treated others, and how consistently he showed up, his silence, his wordless absence, gradually becomes a symbol. Not because he intended it, but because strength that seeks no affirmation leaves the deepest impression. In the journey of inner growth, no one matures by trying to make others regret. True maturity is when a man can leave in silence and let his composure speak for it all. A symbol needs no voice. A symbol exists in the minds of others through what they feel when he is no longer there. When they remember his calm, his unpretentious kindness, or his unwavering presence, they begin to understand that what they once overlooked was the very thing of greatest value. And because that man does not look back, does not try to verify his worth, his silence becomes unforgettable. No reminders, no images, no reappearance. Yet he remains in the thoughts of others a standard of composure and emotional discipline. He does not return for apologies, does not wait for acknowledgement, does not seek to be understood. He knows that everything needed for the other to learn their lesson was already given, not in words, but in the decisiveness of his withdrawal. In Stoicism, nothing is held higher than inner freedom, and the truly free man is one who is unbound by the past, unaffected by expectation, and who has no need to reprise his role in order to be seen. When the chapter of a relationship has been completed, he leaves like the wind, silent, without trace, yet leaving behind a stillness that forces reflection. He does not need to reassert his worth. He does not seek agreement. He does not defend against misunderstanding, nor debate the past. And for that reason, his disappearance ceases to be a mere act. It becomes a symbol of quiet power, of pride in composure, and of inviolable self-respect. Not looking back does not mean hatred. On the contrary, it is the deepest form of forgiveness, a forgiveness that needs no words, because the man is no longer tethered to any negative feeling. He has moved on, not to prove anything, but to continue his path with clarity and peace. In the end, the man who disappears like a symbol is no longer just a character in someone else's story. He becomes a milestone in their journey of awareness, a milestone that bears no name, that needs no monument, yet remains as a reminder that once there was someone who said little, sought nothing, demanded nothing, but whose withdrawal changed the way they understood value, boundaries, and respect. In everyday life, we're not always treated fairly, and not every relationship ends with kindness. Sometimes we're disregarded, hurt, or quietly pushed out of someone's life. In those moments, what arises most easily is the feeling of disappointment and the urge for clarity. But through personal experience, I've come to realize what fosters growth isn't our reaction, but the ability to let go with awareness, not reacting immediately, not seeking understanding from those unwilling to understand. That is a form of strength I once overlooked. But the more I practiced it, the more I came to see. Timely silence is not only a way to protect self-respect, it's also a means of cultivating inner peace. Each time I chose to withdraw instead of a confront, I could feel myself returning to my center, a space no longer swayed by the instability of others. I've learned to stay silent, to reset boundaries, to avoid over-explaining, and to let those who walked away live with their decisions. Because my presence is not something everyone gets to keep. And that isn't arrogance. It is the expression of self-respect, preserved through emotional discipline and a deep reverence for myself. If something in what you've just heard resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content. We're not here to prove our strength to the world, but to live a life that cannot be shaken from the roots. Because when you learn to disappear at the right moment, you don't lose anything. You reclaim yourself. See you in the next video.